session this evening. Thank you so much for your participation. Citizens who have joined us this evening, thank you for participating in government. Tonight we are having a special meeting as a work session. I don't anticipate, unless the council decides otherwise, that we'll be making decisions tonight. We just want to address some of the things that are out there so we can get some ideas and maybe some solutions and approach things in an informative way. So as we begin our meeting tonight, before we have Councilmember Swanson give us either an invocation, a word of silence, or a thought, and then let's lead in the pledge, I'm obligated to read the following, which is the determination of North Ogden City regarding public meetings without an anchor location. Pursuant to Code Section 59-2-407, the Mayor of North Ogden City hereby determines that conducting an electronic meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the code changes in Section 59-2-407 approved by the Utah Legislature regarding the Open Meetings Act, COVID-19 cases, and the need for caution in people meeting together. North Ogden City meetings of North Ogden City in January 2022 and February of 2022, unless things settle down faster than expected, will be held electronically and will not have a physical location. All attendees will connect remotely, and links for public participation are available on the North Ogden City website. Signed by myself, and this is effective for the meeting of February 1st, 2022. So with that, Councilmember Swanson, would you like to lead out at this point in time?
I'll offer an invocation. Father, we're thankful for the opportunity to meet together as a group, as citizens, and as leadership of the city. We're grateful for the fair city that we live in and for the government that we are able to live under and the freedoms that we enjoy. We pray for a spirit of peace and a spirit of cooperation tonight as we discuss matters of the city. And this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. You now join me for the pledge. John, if you can bring the flag up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Swanson. We appreciate you leading us out, starting our meeting off on the right foot with the Pledge of Allegiance and your invocation. I think we have a couple presentations tonight, John, so hopefully Sarah Lansing is with us. She's going to make a presentation based upon the survey that was done by the Parks and Trails Committee. So John, if you could make her a panelist if she's available, we'll go ahead with that presentation.
Can you hear me?
We can, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Can you pull up the slide with the survey results, if you can? No? Yes? There we go. Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to speak at this week's council meeting. Today, I am speaking on behalf of the North Ogden Parks and Trails Committee. We are a resident-led community group in North Ogden that aims to help North Ogden City officials know what residents want, create community involvement for parks and trails, and to assist the city of North Ogden to provide safe outdoor spaces for our community. And sorry about my scratchy voice today. I'm getting over something. So As we previously reported in late October from the last council meeting we were present, we started a new project as a group. We facilitated a survey regarding North Ogden Parks and Trails. The survey asked 10 questions, including what residents like about our parks, what amenities they would like to see in the future, and the question the council requested about the tax increase for new parks, trails, and/or amenities. We are very pleased with the participation and feedback received from the survey. 250 people participated and took time to fill out the online survey between October 20th and December 2nd, 2021. 96% of the participants identified as North Ogden residents. So on to the results. The number one reason given that respondents like our current parks is that they're clean and well maintained. The most requested improvement for our current parks was for trail maintenance, expansion, and/or the paving of the trails. And then the top three most requested amenities for the future is that 72% requested new playgrounds, 66% requested new trails, and 64% requested more shade or trees. Also, 171 of the respondents believe that we need more parks in North Ogden in the future. We also added the question the council requested. We asked, are you open to the possibility of a tax increase to pay for the construction and completion of new city parks and trails and/or new park amenities in the future? The question was asked and answered by the last 150 people surveyed, as the survey had started before the council meeting and the request. Of those 150 participants, 66% supported the proposed tax increase, 14% did not support the tax increase, and 20% preferred not to answer the question. Along with the other data, we received lots of comments, suggestions, and ideas written in by residents, which I think are equally as valuable. We received 175 different suggestions of improvements to our current parks and 100 comments and ideas of what residents wanted the Parks Department and/or the City Council to see. The latter, the council has been provided a copy with prior to the meeting. As previously discussed, the Parks Department and the City Council will be given a full report of the survey results available next week. There will also be a full copy of the results available at the Parks Department for the public to view if they're interested. With the council's approval, we would like to put the same one-page survey of the results shown tonight to be available on the Parks Department page on the city website. So based on the results of the survey, the group has 3 recommendations for the City Council. Number 1, we recommend allocation of enough funds in the next fiscal year to replace the Wadman Park play structure that was taken down last year, as well as the Lowman View play structure that is slated for remodel this year. Number 2, we recommend the completion and paving of the last segment of the trail system that supports that connects Barker Park to Oaklawn Park within the next 3 years. The trail segment that's unfinished is approximately a quarter mile. So, and number 3, we recommend the maintaining our Tree City USA status over the next 3 years. This will ensure that we add new trees and shade every year to the city parks and land. And to the city's credit, we have maintained this status for 14 years running. So, and that concludes our presentation of the survey results. Are there any questions or comments from the council?
Council, any questions for Sarah? I'm not seeing anything, Sarah. You've done such a great job of explaining the survey. I personally, council, unless you object, don't have any problem posting this to the City Parks and Recreation page so citizens can see the result. Just once again with that reminder, because I think it's a little bit confusing to citizens that this is not an official North Ogden City Committee. Otherwise, we would have to invoke some of the open meeting laws. But I think this would be very good for the citizens to know what the results were.
Correct. And if you see on the very bottom of the page, it does have a disclaimer that is a resident-led
Okay.
community group. So
I couldn't see that because that was below, but it's
yeah,
now up there.
I think it's very clear that it's not promoted by the city. It is a community group. So
Okay. Any objections, council, to posting this on the Parks and Recreation page, or as we now have it, I think the North Ogden page. So Sarah, thank you and your group for work on this. This will give us some things to digest
yes,
as we go through the budgeting process and plan for the future. We always like to get input and data, so thank you so much.
thank you very much for your time.
Do you have any questions
Sarah,
for us,
thanks.
Sarah?
No, nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. Please pass on our gratitude to your group.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, council, we'll move into our consent agenda at this point in time. You've had a chance, I assume, to look at the agenda for this evening. Are there any conflicts of interest that you feel need to be disclosed? I see none. John, do we have all the council members here? I can only see a couple at this point in time.
Yeah, they are all here as panelists.
Okay, all is here as panelists. Good. Perfect. So I didn't hear or see any conflicts of interest. We'll move into our active agenda. We'll move on to public comments at this point in time. Once again, if you have a comment you would like to make, if you would raise your hand, John will then inform us of who would like to speak. Once again, if you would limit your comments. Actually, I read the council procedures and currently it says public comments are allowed up to 5 minutes. So if you would be as succinct as possible with your comments and keep them focused on the issue you'd like to discuss, now would be the time to do so. So John, if you would watch to see if we have any public comments.
None at this moment.
Okay, sometimes it's a little difficult to do that, so we'll give just another few seconds. Nothing, John?
No, not at this time. Oh,
Okay, let's
no,
move.
We do have one now.
Okay. Would you like to let us know who that is, John?
It's Richard Wainsgard.
All right, perfect. Richard, go ahead, please. Richard, can you hear us?
So he'll need to unmute himself.
Okay, Richard, if you could unmute yourself and then just tell us if you're a North Ogden resident and make sure that you are Richard.
Yes. Can you guys hear me now?
We can, thank you.
All right.
Go
Well, I
ahead.
have a dental office or a practice in North Ogden, and we'll be discussing it on number 5 coming up. But I just wanted to thank the council members for taking time to address this situation and kind of give us a little bit more light and knowledge about what we can do in the future about the Washington Boulevard sidewalk widths.
Is that everything, Richard, you have this evening?
That's it. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, and that is on our agenda. So we hope to have a very vivid discussion about that, see what options there are. So you're welcome to stay with us.
Okay.
Well, anyone else, John?
Not at this moment.
All right, let's move on to item number 4. This will be a discussion on the Shaw Century Farms located at approximately 281 East Lowman View Drive. I think our presenter this evening will be Scott Hess, our planning director. And Scott, I don't know if the applicant is with us this evening. John, is Johnny Hanson or
sorry.
any of his group with us?
We do have the applicant here, yes.
Okay, we'll first hear from Scott Hess, and then we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant. So Scott, do you want to proceed?
Yep, happy to, Mayor Council. So I intended for the applicant to do the actual presentation tonight, but I would like to just introduce the item. So what we're talking about tonight is the Shaw Century Farms located at 281 East Lowman View Drive. This is in relation to a rezone that was tabled by the council in May of 2021. That was originally an application for a rezone to residential R4. So the applicant produced a drawing of a townhome configuration. There was discussion amongst the council that was not what was the desired product in that area, housing product in that area of the city. And the developer has done multiple iterations. So over the last summer and through the fall, staff has worked with the applicant, their team, in what we think is a very reasonable approach to this piece of property. It does add a few additional housing units than maybe some of the surrounding areas, but it's all a single family product. It's similar in scale and scope to other single family products that we have in the city, including another R15 type of development. And at this point, I think that it was worth the applicant coming and showing a few options and talking through how this would fit in with the community. And then from this discussion, we would be bringing back up the rezone that was tabled to ultimately figure out what potential entitlement zone and that sort of thing moves forward, and then run it through the actual subdivision process. So if you have any questions on context or background, happy to do that, and would actually defer to John Hansen's team if they would like to do the presentation.
Scott, before we defer, could you just refresh our memories on what the proposed land use map indicates in that area, just so our minds are refreshed?
Yes, the proposed land use map for this area is currently downtown mixed use. So it was previously in the residential low density potential conservation area. So that area where number 1 is on top of the map was recommended by General Plan Advisory Committee and Planning Commission to be more akin to the downtown residential area, which if you see the, John, if you can scroll, so the map scrolls north or up just a little bit, other direction, I'm sorry. And so we pick up a little bit further south. That other number 1 to the east of the downtown area is an R15 project that is similar in scale to what this one would look like upon Shaw Century Farms. So the recommended is downtown mixed use, which has a whole host of different uses, including multifamily, R15, and then single family products around that scale.
Okay, thank you. Who's going to be speaking on behalf of the applicant tonight? Do we know? Is that Mark? Is it Johnny? Is it Geneva?
I'm not sure. John asked that same question in
It
the
looks
chat.
like John Hanson raised his hand.
All right, well, let's hear from John. John, are you muted? You need to unmute.
Sorry, we're just being added. Okay. But now you're good.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yep, we can hear you, John.
Oh, great. Appreciate you reconsidering this, City Council and Mayor, on this Shaw property we've been fussing with for over a year. Last summer, we took the mayor and John Call and Scott on a tour of different types of housing in South Davis County and western, just west of the freeway there in West Haven. And those pictures of those homes are on page 12. I assume you all have your packet. On page 12. Now, these are single family homes that are on small lots. If you notice the drawing, some of these lots are 45-foot frontage, some are 40-foot frontage. But the bottom line is the end product lays out very nice in these neighborhoods. There's double garages. They have between 18 and 2,800 square feet in them. And what we were trying to accomplish is that the townhomes that I had presented did not have any space for the little kids to play in the back or to have a dog run around. Whereas these lots do have a backyard that goes with them. And so I think that that's a compromise on the developer's part and hopefully the city's part, that we could maybe set a new precedent here in North Ogden with a project like this in lieu of townhomes filling up our city. So that's basically what we would like to do here. We know that Lauren will have to tweak the drawing a little bit to make sure we have the right frontage and setbacks. We understand that. And another concept that I think is good, I emailed out a new drawing that shows parcel A on it. I don't know if you have that as a separate one from the packet, but it has parcel A. Originally, we were going to have lots 1, 2, and 3 take in parcel A. After talking with the city, the mayor specifically, and Scott, we came to the conclusion that that would make a nice park. And up on lot 20, there's a flowing artesian well, 132 feet deep, that runs probably 5-8 gallons a minute. And we wanted to pipe that down the property line between behind 4 and 5 and make that an amenity in that park. And Mayor, do I want to explain what you and I talked about, maybe expanding the park?
Yes, sir, because as I've been, I think, pretty vocal about that, as we look at this kind of density, I believe we need to look long-term at the effect these has. And these are great people that'll move into these areas, but you know, these are very small lots. I like this much better than townhouses, but I believe people need a place to get away and go take a deep breath and kind of meditate, I guess, for lack of a better word, because otherwise I think we just add to potential domestic violence. I mean, people are good people, but there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of frustrations in the world today. So I believe on these type of projects with this degree of housing in it, we do need some open space. So yes, go ahead, Johnny.
So in this parcel A, Great Basin had 12,912 square feet. They gave me another drawing that said 11,308. I called them. They said, well, until we get the actual survey done, it's probably going to be between 12 and 13,000 square feet. I am willing to donate that to the city for the park. But as the mayor and Scott and I talked about it, you have the well site, just, I don't know if you have the aerial photo there or not. But just east of parcel A, where that little jog is the well site. Around that well site, there can be no sewer within 100 feet. The little line shows you on my drawing there coming across 1 and 2. We were thinking that maybe the city could make that also a part of parcel A, and we could have a larger park there. And that might fit in nicely if Pleasant View Drive is closed, and maybe it could be connected to your park there in front of Lee's, or there's been talk of coming across the road and making a nice place there in the city for a park. So obviously that's just an option that is really in your court, Mayor, and your council to see if that's something that could happen. The property right now with the well being there is basically unusable other than for something like this, just like my parcel A. I mean, I'm within that protection zone of the well. So I think that would be a nice amenity for this neighborhood, and it would be really in downtown North Ogden to have that. And especially with that well coming down on the, from lot 20, I think there could be a nice water feature made there. And that water out of that well could go into the storm drain and hopefully into Patriot Point's pond. That would be a continual refreshing of that water that's going into that pond that supposedly is going to happen with Pine View. So we've looked at lots of options. I personally like and have talked to my grandchildren. Some of them are wanting homes, and they were very excited about this alternative rather than just living in a townhome. And so that's our proposal. Scott would have to tell us what new zone we'd need or how that would happen. I'm not, Scott, you would have to straighten us out on that. But all of the roads in here would be public. Ryan and I talked about this cul-de-sac. He'd have to look at it again from the fire marshal's aspect. We do not have any lots on, we didn't run a road on 36 and 35 originally to come back on Pleasant View Drive. So we elected just to make those large lots of a 20,000 and 22,000 each, which I'm sure the neighbor next door, Mr. Chamberlain, and the neighbors across the street would be excited to have 2 half-acre lots next to them. And I think it adds for a real nice buffer.
Johnny, that's a good presentation. There's only one thing that you and I discussed that you didn't mention.
Okay, help me.
We'd appreciate the donation of the land, but we would, I believe, as a result of the density here, that we would need the park finished. Not an immaculate park, but a small playground, grass, and sprinklers. Obviously, Scott, if this were to happen, it'd probably be a civic zone on that part of the property where the park would be. But, we even talked about potentially, if the landowner would like to participate, maybe the council would consider, that a Shaw Park or something of that nature. But I think the zoning here, which provides the value to the landowner, would justify, in my small mind, that park being finished.
Yeah, I would, I'm sure happy to talk to Jerry Shaw. I'm sure that he'd want that named after Charles A. Shaw, his grandfather. That's what he wants to call that subdivision. And so that would be a nice tribute to his family that they've owned since 100 years or more. So I'm sure willing to work that through, Mayor, as we talked about.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd be able to get him to do all of that. We just have to see the cost over on the city property. That's something that's up for discussion.
Right. And, it's not a big, we're not looking for a, huge, splash pads and things like that. This is just a nice area with some benches, maybe a small playground. That water feature we talked about, I know Mr. Shaw is kind of anxious to make sure that well is utilized and protected.
Yes.
So I think it accomplishes a lot of things. So do you have anything else you'd like the council to hear before I ask Scott if he has anything to add, then go to the council?
No, I hope, there's been a lot of effort go into what really could work for the city and myself on that property. So we're just really at your mercy, City Council, as to do you see this being a real asset to downtown North Ogden? That's what it amounts to.
One thing I like about it, I know the council hasn't seen this type of development, all of them, but with, what's going on in housing and the costs, and, I'm sure it's going to come up what we think the cost of these homes might be in regards to affordable housing. But I think we need to look at different types of this type of housing in our city that's it's a little bit more dense, but it doesn't fill our city up, like you said, with townhouses and things, and gives another option. If this was successful, it gives us another housing option that we've talked about historically. So I really liked, as I said, I told Scott and John this and Mr. Hanson, the developments we saw out there in Layton and in West Haven, they were very well done. And if this has some of the same attributes and requirements, I think it would be something that'd be worth considering. So, Scott?
So the only thing that I would add is that is just kind of the entitlement process forward for this. As I've looked at it, you could keep lots 35 and 36 out and actually part of the RE20 zone. So those are both 20,000 square feet and 22,500 square feet. So I ran the density calculation with and without that acre of 2 lots in there. With it, you're looking at about 5 units per acre. Without them, you're looking at 6 units per acre. So this is really probably closer to an 8,000 square foot average lot size across this whole property, but you lose a little in parcel A being unusable with the wellhead site, parcel B being detention, and then the size and scale of these roads with 300 West being a fairly major in the future north-south connector through this subdivision. The entitlement process moving forward is very close to the R15 zone and even closer to a Quail Ponds PRUD. So there's a few options, those options that we have that are similar to what we have in other areas of the city, and could look at either or on those. Some minor tweaks to the R15 zone if we wanted to see more of this entitled, or it's large enough at over 5 acres that it could be planned residential unit development, and we could write some basic standards specifically for this subdivision. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Scott, and appreciate your efforts on working this out. Let's go to the council since we're in kind of a more open format. Let's start with Councilman Dowpaz. What are your thoughts? Any input, thoughts you'd like to share with the council? Councilmember Dowpaz?
Hi, Mayor. I'm using my phone because my Zoom is struggling. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Great. So my first thoughts is I think one thing I'd like to see is lots 35 and 36, to Scott's point, potentially preserved as RE20 moving forward for the future, just to make sure that those 2 parcels go on in that zoning basically forever until we have any reason to consider rezoning them if needed. And I do love the idea of a little pocket park that's included in here. I think we wouldn't know truly what's going on until we saw some sort of small concept that shows what it would look like. I don't know if this pump house being on city property right now poses much of an issue, being kind of in the middle of what would be that park. So those are my thoughts, but I do think that the housing type is very interesting. I like the idea that we're providing potentially a type of home that is quote unquote affordable. I bet they'll still be expensive, but they're going to be less expensive than homes that are bigger and on larger lots. So as long as Scott feels like this fits the future plan map and what we expect for the area, I kind of have a positive idea of this.
Thank you, Councilmember Dowpaz, for that input. Let's go to Councilmember Barker.
I'm actually in favor of this type of design. Back in my construction days, I've worked in a lot of developments similar to this, and they are a lot nicer than, in my opinion, than townhomes or higher density. But so I'm in favor of this, and I'm all for working with Mr. Hanson's group on developing that park.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. And, just to add a little bit more color, some members of the council attended an economic forum today that talked about housing and inventory and, pricing and what's going on in our market. And I know we're looking for a good balance between our high density, medium density, and low density to get a good mix of providing opportunities for people in our city. And I think to accomplish that, we're going to have to look at different options than we have historically. And this is kind of a new concept. And Scott, it might be worthwhile for council members or citizens who'd like to get a feel for this. Maybe you could put out there the address of some of those spots we looked at so folks could go get a better feel. So let's go to Councilman Swanson.
Thanks, Mayor. I like it. This close together but detached style housing is what is coming out of most surveys of Wasatch Front folks who are looking to purchase a home, who would like to live along the Wasatch Front. This is the kind of housing that is tending to be preferred. And so I like it. I think it's a very nice improvement over the townhome concept. I love the park idea with parcel A and C, parcel A from the developer, landowner, and parcel C from the city, especially with the landowner and developer getting together to improve that park, whether it's mostly grass with sprinklers and a playground on one end, something simple along those lines with a small water feature. But I'm with Councilman Dalpaz and Councilman Barker. I like this.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanson, for your input. Let's go to Councilmember Severing.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Johnny, I think this is really an outstanding development. So I appreciate you taking the time, you and Jerry, to look at this and kind of plan again and again. I think it's really, really great. And what I think is even greater is just that commitment between you and Jerry. You guys are both icons in the area. And what a great way to give back to the community by working on that park there. So thank you. I'm a big supporter of it and appreciate all you did to get it to this point.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. And Councilmember Ekstrom, I haven't forgot you. They say sometimes last is best of all. So let's hear from you.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I get to have the last word. Awesome. No, I love this concept. I really, really do. The thing that I like about it is, that the houses are closer to get close together, which my husband is not going to like. He doesn't like to have those things, but I actually kind of like this because that means that you're close by your neighbors, but you have an outlet, right? It's like there's a place where you can hey neighbor, and then there's a place to meet. It's like you can, everybody can kind of walk down and enjoy this park. I mean, I definitely want to put the park in with it, right? So that it's, it comes to mind the song from Schoolhouse Rock, the elbow room one. It's nice when you're kind of cozy, but not when you're standing nose to nosy. And so this is a really good compromise with that. You've got a single dwelling. You can have a little bit of room to have a barbecue grill outside, maybe a little bit of a garden. And still have room to kind of stretch out and walk in the park. So I really like this. So I give it a thumbs up. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can put together in as far as the park goes that could be really utilized, and developed into something that could be a really great asset. Do you think we would have it? I mean, obviously it's going to be accessible from that cul-de-sac. Would we have it also be accessible from Pleasant View Drive? So I'm looking at that there. Could we have it be, so that it, and then how close is it to Pleasant or to our bicentennial park. If eventually we kind of merge those together. So there's just some possibilities there that I think
Yeah.
look fun.
It's almost right across the street, Councilmember Ekstrom. I do believe in my discussions in looking at this as presented and given to me by Scott. And I think there would be an access off of the cul-de-sac. I don't think there'd be really a parking lot here because it's a pocket park, but you could access it from Pleasant View Drive because it's kind of a walking thing and not really a parking lot situation. So council, what I hear is that we would be willing to consider a rezone of this nature contingent upon the park being completed. Did I understand that right?
That's my position, definitely.
Council, anybody that I missummarized that would be the time to speak up?
That's right.
Okay, so I think, Johnny, does that give you some input? I think maybe keeping those two larger lots in RE20. I think they qualify in that regard. Working with Scott to kind of get a outline of what maybe a reasonable park would look like. There based upon A and C. So we'd probably have to do some tweaking on our current zoning. And then Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but that combination of parcel A and parcel C, and you can see that black line, council, there would be a fence that would run along there. It's very close to the building, but we wouldn't have to take out the buildings, but we do need to take a look at what that well had, how we could maybe incorporate that or build around it. So, Johnny, do you have any further questions?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
The only thing that I would ask for was, Scott, is if we could expedite this rezone or modification of the R15, would sure be appreciated, so that we could start construction in 2022 with these homes.
Johnny, I think what we would need before we're willing to do that, take that next step, we would like to make sure that we have a commitment from the landowner and yourself in regards to the park and what that would look like.
That's a given, absolutely.
So I think we're going to bounce the ball back into your court to find out what can be done there. And maybe a brief
That's a
drawing
given.
of.
I got that.
Okay, and we're not trying to be unreasonable. We'd like something, nice that people could go over, bench, small playground, and with that well being pumped down there, maybe it's a mini stump or maybe a water feature. So we'll wait to hear from you. The ball's in your court.
We'll have a response within a week to you, Mayor.
All right. Is that starting right now?
What was that?
I said, is that starting right now at 6:42?
That's right. I may have it in the morning before you get up. So
Okay, as long as before noon, you probably beat me getting up. So
thank you very much, North Ogden
thanks.
City
You
Council.
bet. Thanks for that discussion, council. Let's move on now to an item that we asked Councilmember Dowpaz and Scott Hess to come back with some recommendations. I would like to get a little background on this regarding, what's triggering this? Where does it tie into our streetscape or ordinance? And frankly, there's been some discussion why we didn't require another business along Washington Boulevard to widen the sidewalk and maybe address the necessity of why this current streetscape requires a 10-foot sidewalk. So I'll turn that over to Councilmember Dowpaz and Scott Hess, our planning director, to give us maybe some background and then some potential solutions to consider.
Thank you. So City Council and Mayor, you'll remember this discussion that was spurred from last week's meeting, and I'm glad that we could officially get this on the agenda so we could discuss it. Basically, what had happened is by the Seacrest and Waynesguard properties looking into adding onto their building and connecting their parking lots, what that did is it triggered a whole new process through Scott Hess and the planning department, trying to see what they need to do and make sure that everything is up to code and all that good stuff. And it came to light that one of the codes, or one of the requirements, as far as we know, is that the sidewalk is required to be 10 feet wide along Washington Boulevard, is my understanding. So I had been in discussions with Richard Waynesguard and Tate Seacrest. They, called me and asked me what my opinion was and if there was anything that we could do. And the reason that they were asking for some help is because it's not really a problem with them wanting to reinvest into North Ogden. They're willing to do that, I believe. It's that it was kind of a above and beyond type of project that they would have to do, because there were, as I recall, there was about 3 utility boxes that would have to be moved at approximately $5,000 each to move those boxes. There were some water line connections that go to their landscaping that would need to be moved. So there were quite a few things that it was estimated by their construction estimate that if they wanted to put in cement, basically put in that 10-foot pathway, it would be approximately $10,000 for them to do that. And I think overall they were kind of okay with that. What was really a problem is that they had all of these additional expenses that were starting to kind of inhibit what they were trying to do. And in talks with Scott, he's going to list out some options or some ideas as to how we might treat this type of situation in the future. And I really want to get the city council's input and their ideas of what they think might be a good idea. But essentially, we're looking to maybe come up with a solution where if somebody is not building a brand new subdivision in this situation, they're adding on to their building, they're connecting the 2 parking lots. They're trying to make it kind of a better situation, because along Washington Boulevard there's that median, and people in the area, they have to do a U-turn on Washington to kind of get back to these properties. And by them connecting the 2 lots together, it apparently resolves some of those issues to a degree. So they're trying to improve North Ogden. I truly believe that they're trying their best to make it a good project. But I just want to lob it over to Scott to discuss what potential solutions might be. But the main thing is the trigger is coming because it's a subdivision action that is coming up. And that's why they are being required to put in this 10-foot sidewalk. And it's not a brand new subdivision. To me, it's an addition or it's a renovation type of situation. And so I'm kind of curious what Scott's ideas. I mean, he talked to me about some of them, but I want to hear what he has to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Dalpaz. And Scott, as you begin this, could you give us a little background on where the 10-foot sidewalk comes from? The triggering event here. I know that as we replaced that water line in front of the theater, that was replaced with 10-foot sidewalk based upon this streetscape ordinance. So if you could tell us what triggered this, what ordinance it refers to, and what we would need to do. Frankly, I'm not one for exceptions to ordinances, because I think you get into selective enforcement of things. Oftentimes you don't really do the landowner a favor, because ultimately if we decide that's what's going to happen, it costs a lot more down the line to do those things. So give us a little background on what ordinance this relates to, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you.
Sure. And I wish that Lauren Gardner, our city engineer, was here. I think he could probably give you a better original timeline of this, but the drawing for the 10-foot wide sidewalk on Washington Boulevard, along with the streetlight spacing, street trees requirements, and other things like right-hand turn pockets and when the park strip narrows and that sort of thing are all built into the public works standards and technical specifications. So that's an administrative document that is that's accepted by ordinance. So, oh, good, Lauren is here. So it's a, I wouldn't say it's an ordinance the way Title 11 and 12 are ordinances, but what it is when you have a subdivision, you're required to meet the public works standards. When the public works standards for Washington Boulevard say a 10-foot sidewalk, that's an administrative item. So the tipping point or the trigger, the land use trigger in this case was a site plan that elevated based on its cost to a full planning commission site plan review, and then a lot line adjustment, which is in effect a subdivision action, and the time that we collect things like sidewalk or roadway improvements along with any other subdivision. So it's not exact, it's a minor version of what we're looking at with the previous Shaw Century Farm subdivision, that we don't have an ordinance that says the roads have to be exactly this wide with this depth of road base and the pipes this size. It relates to the public works standards, standard drawings, which we rely on in the engineering department to construct things to a degree that the city can take them over and own and maintain them in perpetuity. So that was the trigger. And from the planning department side, I understood even going into it in that planning commission meeting that this would be a burden for the applicant to bear. But it's part of the standards, the same way that if we didn't have those street lights that are already installed, we would have required street lights. We require the street trees and the spacing there. So that's kind of a bit of background before I dive into, I guess, some potential solutions or things to talk through with the council. Are there any questions there?
Mayor, I have a question.
Okay, Councilmember Swanson, go ahead.
With this standard being established, I'm trying to understand how it was missed by their engineers or designers. How did this get missed so that it became a surprise?
Yeah, so on the drawing that came in, it was part of our review notes. So it's a minor subdivision, this drawing. And so what they were really focused on was the parking lot connection, the drive aisle widths, the parking stalls themselves. There's slope issues. I think what they were really focused on was the drawing of that parking lot and getting the improvements correct there. And it wasn't an item that required a redraw. So I had made Rich Wangsgard, who was the applicant on the item, aware of that sidewalk leading up to the planning commission meeting, because it was one of the approval recommended items in the conditions of approval, but it didn't necessitate a redraw, for instance. I mean, there are times that we require a developer to go back to the drawing board and bring us a more complete plan, but the plan was good. It just didn't show that 10-foot wide sidewalk.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Swanson?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Scott, do you have some solutions for us to consider this evening?
Yeah, so staff has been considering this, and we have, I guess I have the benefit of being here the last 7.5, 8 months. And so there's a lot of decisions that have been made prior to me getting here. And the timing of those decisions is interesting. So there have been brought up applicants that received additional signage or facade improvements or building upgrades that weren't required to do this. You have other businesses that let out, or other buildings that let out. So in front of the car wash, for instance, in front of Village at Prominence Point, you have a 10-foot wide sidewalk there. The 10-foot wide sidewalk is expected to run south along the length of Village at Prominence Point down to 1700. Cooperstown Apartments, which has been approved but not constructed next to Walker Cinemas, is required to do the water line upgrade, as well as the 10-foot sidewalk and street trees and associated streetlights, all of those improvements. So I don't know all of the decision making that went into any of those individual site plan reviews and why or why not we didn't require the sidewalk widened for their length of the properties. In this case, staff saw that it was required. We required it. So the action that I've got 4 options here, and I can run through them, and then I can answer questions for what, any of them that you have questions on.
Run through those, Scott.
Okay, so 1, city council takes no action. The applicant builds it per the standards. So that's just the do no action. 2 was provide the applicant with a deferral with a time-dependent date for the council to consider basically what to do in this case. So give them, lob the ball, let them move forward with their subdivision, recording it, building permit, all of those items, and defer the sidewalk installation to another date. The third option is to review our standards and or review our site plan review guidelines in Title 11 to specify exactly when this sidewalk is required. So is it required as part of all site plan reviews that elevate to the level of planning commission? Is it required only when it's new construction from the ground up? Is there a hybrid of those? Like at a certain level of investment in our city, we want them to also bring the sidewalk up to level. So it essentially reviewing the code to establish the true tipping point and then administer that consistently, basically. And then option 4 is look into options that would have the city completing the sidewalk. And this could be adding it to long-term capital improvement project time frame. So we begin a fund over at Public Works that is sidewalk enhancements and put a little bit of money away, and in 5 years go and do a chunk of the project, put a little money away. Or we apply a special improvement district to a geography of Washington Boulevard, whereby all of the property owners along that stretch of Washington Boulevard have a slight property tax increase. That property tax increase is then funneled into a fund. And again, after a number of years, we go out and do one project and the city completes the project. So from staff standpoint, I think it comes down to what is the city's desires for walkability on Washington Boulevard? What do we want? Do we want consistent approach to the installation? Do we want to get this onesie twosie over the next 20 years? There are a lot of sections of that sidewalk that are going to be very difficult to build if we're waiting for a developer to build them for us. Like for instance, the new Smith's Plaza that we'd hope that have a lifespan of 20 plus years from today before they're doing any major renovation work on that site. You've got the hospital or the Ogden Clinic. There's a few that we're going to have missing chunks of wide sidewalk if we leave it up to development to do, and or you'll have kind of wide spots in the street. So staff is happy to administer any of those. Very supportive of walkability, very supportive of increased, bus stop access, all of these things that would enhance our downtown, but also certainly willing to work with businesses in the city who want to invest in the city and improve it and figure out, kind of a proper trigger for when this sort of investment happens.
Scott, could the city trigger that along some of the properties you mentioned, like in front of the Smith's Marketplace, et cetera, with a service district and require that? Or does it have to be based upon some type of action of enhancement or?
Yeah, if you're collecting it as part of development applications, there has to be a land use trigger, and that can be a number of things. It could, if you wanted to be really harsh, any exterior modifications to buildings require you to meet the streetscape standards. Like the city could require whatever you want to, but just as I don't have to have a code that says when you're subdividing in our city, you're going to provide water lines that meet our requirements. You lean on the public works standards. And in this case, the public works standards are explicit on Washington Boulevard about what the sidewalk has to be.
Okay, but I guess my question is if we wanted to get that consistent all along Washington Boulevard, say in the next 2 years or 3 years, could we go and say, we're going to create a special improvement district? Your property taxes as a business, and I'm not proposing this, I'm just asking the question. We're going to go up so that we can widen that sidewalk, whether you do anything or not.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think anyone's trying to be harsh at all. As I explained last council meeting, my concern is, and we're seeing this in this particular instance, one of the basis is, well, you didn't make so-and-so do it, right? So every time we make an exception, well, so-and-so didn't have to do this. And then we find ourselves in a real mess. And I'm very sensitive to the problem we've got here. But my feeling is, and this, once again, just my feeling, that if we want to change the ordinance or the street standards, that's all good. But when we start, in fact, I wouldn't be adverse to having an ordinance that prohibits deferrals, because on what basis do we make those? And then we have to be consistent in that application. So my feeling is that, if we want to change the streetscape or the public works things, great, if that's what the council wants to do. I don't have any problem with that. But if we feel that needs to be maintained, then that's where I believe the problem is created, because all of a sudden we get accused of selective enforcement of this ordinance or that deal. But I see Lauren has his hand raised. So before we go to you, Council Member Swanson, I'm going to ask you to maybe lead out on this discussion. Let's go to Lauren first. He's got his hand up. John?
You should be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
We can, Lauren.
Okay, I just wanted to give a little clarification on what Scott was saying about the streetscape, and as it relates to our public work standards. The streetscape was proposed, Kai Johnson put together that streetscape standard, and it was adopted by the city. And that streetscape included not only the 10-foot sidewalk, but it also included street trees and street lights that would go into those areas. Once that standard was adopted, we have since had several projects that have come through that we've required those improvements to go in. For instance, while we were working on that streetscape standard, the townhomes by the cannery came in, but we didn't require them to put in the 10-foot wide sidewalk. The streetlights were already there. They added some landscaping, and we left it as is. We couldn't require that 10-foot sidewalk at that time. But following that development, we had the streetscape standard adopted, and since then we have then incorporated it into a standard plan within our public work standards. And we have been, since that point, requiring it on all projects as they come through. So prior projects that didn't have it go in, such as, let's say, Maverick, or the chiropractor office that did some remodel, those were all prior to that streetscape standard being adopted by the council. If that makes any sense.
I think that's good information, and we appreciate that, Lauren. Anything else to add?
No, I think that's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Councilmember Swanson, let's hear from you. Then we'll go to Councilmember Ekstrom, Councilmember Severing, Councilmember Barker, and then we'll end up with Councilmember Severing. So go ahead, Councilmember Swanson. Let's hear what your thoughts are.
Thanks, Mayor. My thoughts on the deferral haven't changed since the last time here recently that we talked about a sidewalk deferral, and that is, I don't believe that we do the deferral. I see our responsibilities to act in the best interest of the city, not of individuals. And in this case, being out on a major thoroughfare, it shouldn't have been a surprise that this was required. I know that it ended up being a surprise, but it shouldn't have been. And it's, in my mind, part of the cost of doing business and participating in making the city the great place that it is. So in short, I'm not in favor of a deferral. I believe that we take no action and we require the 10-foot.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanson, and I apologize, Councilmember Dalpaz. I was going to save you for last, so because I know you're involved in this. So let's go to Councilmember Ekstrom.
Okay, I have a lot of opinions about this. Number one, I don't know where the 10-foot arbitrary sidewalk width came from, but I look at that sidewalk going in down where we just put it in front of the theater, and I think that is overkill. We do not need a sidewalk that wide. I don't know why we have a sidewalk that wide. I mean, I agree that we don't do the, number one and number two options. I don't really agree with. I think I don't want that much money wasted on what I feel like is an overkill sidewalk for that business. It's just too much. I can see kind of the walkability issue where we've got a lot more density kind of happening down in Village at Prominence Point and Cooperstown. It's like, yeah, maybe they might want a 10-foot sidewalk, but up where it's already developed and, the 4-foot or whatever sidewalk that they've had has serviced us years. I don't see a lot of people walking up and down it. So I would review this. I would revisit. I would say, like, why do we have this? This seems too much. I like, the streetscape. I like having landscaping there. I like having the street lights, but I don't know about the 10-foot sidewalk. So I would look into, also, I like the idea of doing the special improvement district if we're going to require businesses to do this, residents to do this. I would rather see money put in, and I want to live in a North Ogden that has sidewalks everywhere, right? And I'm willing to pay for into the big pot that North Ogden puts sidewalks where they are really needed. So that I kind of like a hybrid of options 3 and 4 myself. Just because I think deferring, that just kicks it down the road. And then it's just like, oh, we're deciding it again. And just as you said, Mayor, then we're looking like we're wishy-washy, and we're also maybe playing favorites. And I don't want to do that either. So for me, I want to look at, why 10 feet, and that's just coming from me saying, there's a lot of other places I would much rather take that much money and put sidewalks where it was going to cost less and have a lot bigger impact than sticking a 10-foot sidewalk where not that many people walk in front of. So there's my 15 cents.
Okay, I think it was 25 cents, but
could have been.
we'll go with that. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, I think next was that you, Councilmember Barker, or was that Councilmember Severing? Let's go with Councilmember Barker. It looks like he's ready.
I agree a lot with what Councilman Swanson said. I am not in favor of deferral agreements. However, I also feel if we weren't in favor of them, then they shouldn't be allowed in our city, period. If by allowing them, and then we have the discretion to choose whether to enforce them or to adopt them or not, that's where I have an issue, because then we're making a decision of who are we going to be selective with and who are we not. That's why last week I made the motion to pass it, because I am not going to, if it's there and it's an option and we've allowed them in the past, we've got to keep allowing them until we get them off our books. In this case, I am not, I have strong feelings about making a couple businesses that want to expand their parking lot and add on to their building, put in the infrastructure out front where they're not even touching it. And if we're going to make them move the water lines and electrical boxes just because they want to expand their parking lot, that doesn't seem right to me. You're muted, Mayor.
Most people prefer that, but thank you for your comments. Councilmember Severing.
Well, I feel a little bad for Scott, who's coming in here today. Maybe fielding a lot of opinions from the city council. And he wasn't here when those decisions were rendered. But personally, I'm Councilwoman Adam. I have Parker businesses here that are successful in North Ogden. They want to make an adjustment to a lot line and put in some additional space. For me, we could change things. I mean, this city council will pass. Somebody could come in 4 years and completely change from the 10-foot sidewalk to the 4-foot sidewalk. And then we have a whole mixture up and down North Washington, of like a tie-in agreement. We'll let you do this as long as you do that. And so for me, I would favor allowing Richard Wangsgard and Seacrest to complete the boundary change that they need to make without quid pro quo of having to expand the sidewalk and the utility boxes. So
Councilmember Severing, I need to kind of stop you right there on this quid pro quo thing that you're using. Can you explain why you feel that's the case?
Oh, to me, it's like I said, Mayor, I know that we change things periodically. And it seems like businesses that have been there for a period of time ought to be grandfathered into the code that they were in at the time. And not all of a sudden, because they want to make an adjustment, all of a sudden have kind of a approach. Well, we could probably do that for you, or we could do that, but you need to also make sure that you're running, 200 feet of 10-foot wide sidewalk. So I'm just talking about my perception, Mayor.
Okay, because I think that's an ordinance, and I'll just take this opportunity to express my opinion, then we'll go to Dalpaz. I would prefer, similar to what Councilmember Ekstrom said, if we're going to change the public works requirements, then let's go ahead and change that. But if that's a requirement and we keep making all these exceptions to the rules, frankly, I would prefer somebody to make a motion at our next council meeting to prohibit deferrals altogether. Because we're picking and choosing on what we want to do and on what basis we want to do that. And I'm just telling you, I've been around long enough to know that that creates a lot of headaches down the road. Because if we come in later and say, okay, we're sticking with 10 feet and we're going to make everybody put that in there, the cost to the property owner dramatically increases over time. So to me, the decision needs to be made, are we going to keep this streetscape public works requirement? And if we are, we ought to stick to that. And if we're not, let's change the requirement. And
so Mayor,
I'm not adverse at this point in time. If somebody made in the next council meeting a thing that prohibits deferrals, I think it'd probably pass. Because what we're doing is we're picking and we're choosing here. And this has nothing to do with Wangsgards or anything like that, because they are a good business and we appreciate it. This isn't picking on them. This is just something that I think adds, it's kicking the can down the road. It's something that I would like to know why, like Councilmember Ekstrom said, why is the 10 foot? Because I've heard a lot of positive comments about the sidewalk down in front of the theater. So that's my 2 bits with, and I think we just, at some point in time, we need to quit picking and choosing of what we're going to enforce and what we're not going to enforce. I would prefer that we change, if the streetscape standard in public works, we don't think that's right, let's address it. But these individual things is, I think, going to get us in trouble long term. Councilmember Severing?
Well, I was just going to say, Mayor, so, I'm all about proposing an ordinance for no future deferrals, does that mean everything then is grandfathered in the past and anything that's being built in the future then has to be? I mean, have Scott explain to us what that would look like.
Well, once again, if they do something that triggers it under the current ordinance, they would be required to comply with the streetscape standards.
So nobody's grandfathered in.
Not if they don't make a change. Because that's the thing of, one business has to do it and one business doesn't have to do it. And then we kind of get in this, you didn't make them, you didn't do this. I would hope at some point in time we create a special service district. And if we think 10 feet's right, or if it's 6 feet, whatever it is, let's just get it done. Just my 2 bits. So anything else? Councilmember Severing?
Well, I'm just thinking that if we decide to do this kind of an ordinance on a deferral ordinance, then it's by necessity, it becomes something that goes into effect in the future, right?
It's in effect right now.
Okay, so any business along Washington that had the deferral for a sidewalk because they put in an asphalt parking lot, it's okay for them at this point then?
Well, if they make that change under the current ordinance, and I don't know the exact date of when that was put in effect, Lauren still has his hand up. Maybe he has some input in that of when that happened. But, if they make a change that triggers it under the current public works requirements, they would have to do the same thing that we're asking now.
The only thing I have a problem with that, Mayor, is I just don't like that we can change something in 3 years and all of a sudden have something completely different because we think this is going to be a better plan for North Ogden. And then all of a sudden we put all the businesses, if they make any kind of change, we're going to expect them to pay that kind of money. And quite honestly, I don't think we're going to see 10-foot wide sidewalks from 1700 north to 2600 in my lifetime.
Well, we could, and I would say that, the thing on what councils can change, we can't base decisions on an unknown factor of what somebody's going to do in the future.
No, but I also
each council has the right to do that, to make the change. But frankly, if this council today said we're going to create a special improvement district and we're going to require 10-foot sidewalk or 6 or whatever it is along there, then that's why I asked Scott, could we do that? Because maybe that's the answer, just to get this thing done with and quit fiddling around with it, because it's like like John said, these deferrals are becoming more and more requested. And, I feel bad for these guys.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Barker.
Just to maybe answer a few questions that Councilman Severing mentioned. Codes change all the time. In my time as a fire marshal in 9 years, this summer, I'll be bringing the 4th code change to the fire code to the city council for adoption. So every 3 years, codes are changing for building codes, construction codes, everything. It changes frequently. And also under code talk, we hate the word grandfathered in because it's not accurate. If your building is built under a certain code, you can stay under that code, but you're not grandfathered in until if you ever do a remodel or a change of use, then you have to get brought up to the current code. So there's no grandfathered in, you're just staying under the previous code because you're built under that previous code.
But Councilman Barker, if I can maybe respond to that, I think there's wisdom in things like older buildings that may need to have upgraded windows for ingress and egress. We're talking about a sidewalk.
I think he was directing his comments to the fact that your reason for not doing this is because codes change. And, we can't control that. All we know is that we have a code in place right now. And like I said earlier, If the council wants to relook at that and make a change, great. That's their prerogative. But to start making these exceptions to all these codes and standards, in my opinion, is not proper governance, because we have to pick and choose. And then once we start picking, that becomes the expectation of the citizens.
Mayor,
Councilmember Swanson. You're muted, Councilmember.
there I go. How's that? Better?
Good. We can hear you.
I think we have to be very careful here about two things. One, Councilmember Severing, is the use of the term quid pro quo. In government settings, that is a really dangerous illegality. It is basically promising a developer, that if you do this for us, we'll give you zoning that we won't give otherwise. You have to be very careful about using that. An exchange, a negotiation is not a quid pro quo. And we have to be very careful about using that term in the work that we do. Secondly, Councilmember Ekstrom mentioned playing favorites. It's exactly what we're doing here. Since this ordinance has been passed, we have required it of everybody. Lauren, our engineer, just mentioned that to us a moment ago. By now saying that this is a circumstance where it shouldn't be applied, we are playing favorites. We're being arbitrary, we're being capricious, not wanting to have an ordinance because there might be somebody that we know or that is a long-term family or business here in North Ogden that ought to be grandfathered, or really when we say grandfathered, we're really just exempting them from the ordinance. That we would rather not have an ordinance is, again, exactly playing favorites. We're saying that some people need to follow the ordinance. We want to be able to choose those who do not follow the ordinance, who do not have to follow the ordinance. I don't have a problem if we decide that we're not going to, we want to pass an ordinance where there are no deferrals. Great. If council decides that, if council wants to decide the width for the 10-foot sidewalks, I can tell you, because I was on the council at the time that those were decided, it was all about the ability for two-way traffic on a sidewalk. You have a couple of kids coming one way on scooters or a bicycle, and you have a family with a stroller walking the opposite direction. A 5-foot sidewalk isn't enough room to comfortably and safely pass each other. And as our city grows, I'm looking at when we hit that 40,000 plus, and we have the businesses along Washington, I still am convinced that a 10-foot sidewalk is the safe way to go to give people the feel that they are away from Washington Boulevard. There's a certain psychological safety feel when you have the wider sidewalk that's away from the street, and the comfortability that I don't have to move towards the street in order to avoid somebody oncoming on a scooter, a bicycle, another family with a stroller, whatever it happens to be. My biggest concern right at the moment is that we are exactly playing favorites right now. We are picking based on either relationships, length of time in the city, whatever it happens to be internally for each of us. We are picking who has to follow an ordinance and who doesn't. And that is not good government at all. It's not what we're here to do. And anyway, I could go on forever on this one.
Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Swanson. Councilmember Dowpaz, let's go to you.
I would like to look into reviewing the code to making sidewalk enhancements to 10 feet only necessary on new builds. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Depending on the impact to the businesses, I am not against looking into a special improvement district so we can just work on getting 10-foot sidewalks all along Washington. But my biggest worry with that is I don't know how much per month or per year that would add on to those businesses' property taxes. So I think I'd have to be very careful to make any recommendation there. But I would be of the idea that I think we're leaning a lot on the idea of talking about deferrals a little bit too much here. I want to look into the idea of looking at the code that basically says when that trigger comes in, can we just say, since it's not a new build, that it just remains a regular sidewalk? And then in the future, if anything is ever, I just think that the idea is we could get an improvement district potentially in for the future to do it, but it just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, thank you. We do, I think, have another comment from our city engineer, Lauren Gardner.
Yes, I just wanted to expound a little bit on the special improvement district. Those are generally done when we have the majority of property owners who are in favor of doing it. You don't have to get 100%, but it's usually a majority. A couple things that happen, those are out under contract with the city. And when we do a construction project like that, our franchise agreements which deal with those utilities, and we mentioned there's a couple of utility boxes on this one that have to be relocated. But under the franchise agreements, we can dictate to those utilities to move those improvements if we have conflicts with ours, and it will be done at the utilities cost. Where a private party like the Wainscots have to do it at their own cost. And so there is a benefit to doing it as a special improvement district. One, we can get it done at a better cost and more efficiently complete the whole project, whatever portion that is of the streetscape along Washington. So that's all I had to add.
Thanks, Lauren. And I think your point about businesses, the majority of the businesses having to approve a special improvement district. I mean, as Councilmember Dalpas says, nobody likes increased taxes, but nothing's free in the world either, as I discovered. So what I'm hearing, Council, is that our approach on this would be to look at the Public Works ordinance, get some additional background on that. And if we're going to make the request here, it would be in changing the ordinance, not making an exception. Is that what I'm hearing? That we would take a look at the current requirements, see if there needs to be any changes. That's up to the council if they do, but I think Councilmember Swanson had some good points in his discussion that we need to be aware of as we move forward. So with that, would it be fair to say that we'll look at the streetscape standards of Public Works? I mean, it may include changing the lighting. It may include, I don't think we just look at one aspect of it. Let's look at it and see what makes sense for the future of our city. So is anybody object to that? If so, raise your hand. I can see just about everybody but Councilmember Dalpas. Is everybody in favor?
I'm okay with that idea, Mayor.
Okay. Looks like Councilman Barker, is that a thumbs up from you? Councilmember Severing? So that's the approach we'll look at this to say, okay, is the streetscape standards what we want? And I'd appreciate some background from Councilmember Swanson and John and those who have been around on the basis for that, because you think about it, there wasn't too long ago that we were looking at bringing electric scooters into the city, right? At some point that may be the case, and if they're driving those along the sidewalk, which they're allowed to do, and we've got somebody pushing their carriage along there and with their family, these are some of the things we need to consider and make sure we don't have any unintended consequences. So we'll proceed along those lines and appreciate the discussion. I think there were some good points brought up by everyone. So
Mayor, can I add something?
Go ahead, Councilmember Severing. It's kind of open discussion tonight.
As long as we're going to be looking at that ordinance for streetscape, let's just make sure that we take the time to reevaluate what might be considered trigger terms.
Okay, we can surely look at that too. On what causes that, so. Okay, good points. Let's go on to item number 6. Also, Scott's going to address this. This is some additional discussion for requested information on the future land use map in regards to definition of low density, moderate density, high density, some of those things. So Scott, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So I've provided you with a staff report. The staff report had been updated for the last council meeting when this came on, when the item was deferred now to this work session. But what I'd like to go into is a small slide deck that was part of your packet as well. So in response to the council's question about what constitutes low, medium, and high density, I've gone out and done some research. So I contacted the former president of the Utah American Planning Association, Ted Knowlton. He also works for the Wasatch Front Regional Council, our metropolitan planning organization that assists 5 counties, including Weber County, with looking at an alignment of land use and transportation investment. And they have a long-range vision which pulls together all of these individual communities across 5 counties and makes an attempt to kind of smooth out the bumps between everybody's individual zoning. So I thought if anybody would have a universal or maybe a regional definition of low, medium, high, that would be the case. But again, it's all context-based. So it's really more in the context of the county, and then they defer even to drill down into the context of the city. So John, if you'll click to the next slide. The way that I tackled this was I thought, well, let's consider what the current general plan says. So there is language in our current general plan that has these 4 definitions for residential density: rural residential, large lots, 1/2 acre and larger that can include limited agricultural activities. Those would most closely associate with the RE20 zone if you're talking about zones on the ground. Low density, typically single family development with homes built on lots 8,000 square feet and larger, densities in the range of 1 to 6 units per acre. So what, to frame your mind around that, what we just saw on Century Shaw Farms calculates out to under 6 units per acre. Even removing that 1 acre of RE20, it's still 5.9 units per acre. That for North Ogden is still technically low density, at least under the definition of low density as it's in the current 2015 general plan. Medium density residential lots, 4,000 square feet to 7,999. Housing types ranging in densities of 6 to 18 units per acre, and high density was 18 units per acre to 40 units per acre. So I went through an exercise, John, if you'll click on the next slide, to see what we're currently recommending. So I realize this is a wall of text. It's kind of a lot of information, but I'll walk you through how this works and what it is. I've color coded this to match the draft future land use map within each of these boundaries and attempted to take a future land use area, the land use designation on the left side, and apply it to what zones were being recommended in there in order to see what is low, where the break for medium is, and what the break for high is in our city, and also understand densities of projects on the ground so you can get a feel for what the number that's said is in relation to what that project looks like and or feels like. So residential hillside, that's everything Mountain Road and above, essentially kind of to the north and east, is HP1, HP2, HP3. Those fall into a range of 2 acres per unit in HP3 up to 10,000 average lot size per unit, or 0.23 acres, giving you a density range of half a dwelling unit per acre up to just under 5 dwelling units per acre. The next residential low density, the darker yellow color on the map, which is really the balance of our city, is ranging from about 0.45 dwelling units per acre. We do have quite a lot of existing RE20 density in there, or development in there, up to 5.4 dwelling units per acre, which is the R15 code when applied to low density. So I have the code reference there, 117C4D1, because R15 has a specification for when it's utilized in the low density areas or where it's utilized in the medium or higher density areas. We talked a little bit about the gold area. This is that transitional two-family overlay. I applied RCC and R18 in there, which are the two current underlying developments. R15, because I think that that's likely relevant to the conversation. And then R2, which is our two-family dwelling zone that requires 6,000 square feet per unit. So technically by our code, you can get a more dense project by developing a single family product on an R15 than you can under a two-family dwelling R2 scenario. R15 looking at when you go down to the 4,000 square feet per unit, you can get up to 10.9 dwelling units per acre. So that's, in staff's opinion, where the break line between low density and medium density is really once you hit that 5.5 to 11 units per acre, you're into medium. The orange area expands on that, but has the same breakdown of zones. So that's just another area just outside of the downtown mixed use. And then the downtown mixed use zone ranges up to R4. We actually include the MPC zone for Patriot Point. And I did MPC Village at Prominence Point just as a reference point for what the MPC can do. But Patriot Point, which is an existing project being developed out right now, is roughly 11.8 dwelling units per acre when you divide the gross acreage by the number of units. So you take out detention, open spaces, roads, those sorts of things, additional parking areas, that net density will increase, but the gross density is roughly 11.8 dwelling units per acre. Our R4 zone on the perfect piece of property that is flat, unencumbered by any geologic hazards, minimum roads necessary there as far as roadway widths. Really the highest density you can expect out of an R4 is 12.5 dwelling units per acre, or basically the townhome project that you get with the Patriot Point development. You know, it might look a little bit different. You may be able to do a 3-story walk up, some sort of other configuration, but you're basically capped at 12.5 dwelling units per acre. And then the highest density project that the city currently has on the books, the Village at Prominence Point, is 18.46 dwelling units per acre, straight out of the development agreement. So that's the developable area divided by the number of units there in that project. There's an averaging because you have an independent living facility, some cottages, some townhomes, and then 3-story townhomes. But on the whole, for the size of that project, you're looking at 18.5 dwelling units per acre. So the current vision actually doesn't get to a point to even meet the 2015 description of what high density is, which is 18 dwelling units per acre up to 40. You know, we haven't ever done a project. We've never contemplated a project at that density. And so the text at this point is really out of line with both the reality that we've seen on the ground with the projects, as well as probably the community's vision. I included this red box here as the mixed use multifamily commercial. There's box number 4 surrounds the area of Kurt's drive-through and the cannery. And I think that represents an excellent opportunity for redevelopment for the city in the future, and that we should contemplate some sort of new mixed use code that talks about walkable commercial that we don't even have on the books at this point. We don't have an applicable zoning district in that case.
Hey,
So
Scott, I
yeah.
have a question.
Sure.
Had we not had an MPC zone, would that have influenced what high density is? Because, you know, we've had discussion about having MPC zone because that was supposed to be a mixed use to provide housing to support commercial.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm guessing that the general plan in 2015 saying 18 to 40 units per acre was leaning on the recently adopted MPC zone at that time from 2013, 14. John may have the timeframe there pinned down, but my guess is that that was in response to the MPC zone and the flexibility it allowed depending on the project.
Yeah, I would say the MPC zone was probably created to allow Village at Prominence Point, but I think, and I wasn't on the council at the time, but it would seem like the philosophy was more density would bring commercial. We found that's not the case. And in fact, most of the MPC zoning projects since that time, I feel were utilized by the developer just to increase allowable density in most cases. It wasn't for the original meaning of having a kind of a mixed use commercial. I mean, you look at Cooperstown, for instance, the original proposal was no commercial, right? But the density was wanted to make the project work. We said we have a zone here. Here's if you want to get that, here's the requirements. You even look at Patriot Point, for instance. It has a little bit of commercial along 2550, but that could be 20 years before it's built out. So, there has been some discussion about really, do we want to even continue that zone going forward? So without that, then what would become high density?
Your highest density would be R4. I mean, you can actually max out your residential R15 at a 4,000 square foot per unit single family home at 11 dwelling units per acre, and your R3, which requires on average, it's a calculation based on 12,000 square feet for the first 2 units, and then 3,000 square feet for the next 2 units, and then it resets. And so that can get you 10 units per acre. So really,
is that moderate though? Isn't that just classified as moderate right now?
Yeah, we don't really have, basically. I mean, we don't have, if the council wanted to eliminate the inconsistencies of the MPC and consider, say, an R5 zone that had a max density of whatever you determined was applicable, somewhere 15 to 20 units per acre, whatever it was, and then just apply those standards consistently, as opposed to the MPC zone, which is development agreement based, contract based zoning, you would likely end up with more assurity in the projects that you would be bringing in. So that's a discussion for the council to have as far as what the highest of the high density that the city at this time wants to see in its projects.
Okay, thanks.
The next slide is basically these definitions, but in just fewer words. So in my opinion, low density is 5 dwelling units per acre and fewer, medium 11 dwelling units per acre and fewer, and high being anything between 11 and 20 dwelling units per acre, at least in the context of North Ogden. And after this slide, there's some information that I put together for, actually we've got one more. Sorry, John, if you'll click to the next one. I think this is an extremely useful tool. I was just recently alerted to this by Wasatch Front Regional Council's newsletter, but they have a housing inventory explorer. I walked into Brandon's office last week when I was putting together these slides, and I said, could you tell me the percentage of land area of the city that is single family versus multifamily? And we kind of batted around a GIS, a mapping exercise of how to do that. And it turns out that Wasatch Front Regional Council has done this, and it runs up through 2020. It's based on the Weber County GIS, Weber County GeoGizmo information. And this has the breakdown of single family versus attached and multifamily. And this is a little old, it's 2020, so it's pushing 2 years old. But essentially in the city right now, we have 5,785 single family units, and the multifamily units, which is under on my, let's see if I can see it on this one, 943. So we're, 14% or so multifamily versus single family. I think the reason that this slide is important is because even if we made drastic changes and permitted, continue to permit majority or majority multifamily permits, it would take years, I mean, our build out, I really don't think that we're going to outstrip our supply of existing single family homes. I mean, the fabric of the community is largely established. We have wonderful neighborhoods, wonderful areas of single family. And at this point, I think that we're really kind of working around the edges or massaging the edges of where these growth challenges will be met with demand and where we should include additional intensities of development that best aligns with job opportunities, aligns with transportation opportunities, provides for opportunities to maybe collect open space in conjunction with development and increased density. But that really, there's not been, even in accepting Village at Prominence Point and other areas, this sea change of the community fabric of North Ogden. It still remains by and large single family separated units.
Scott, how many multi-housing units? I mean, it seems like we've got quite a bit of build out left at Prominence Point with the apartments, particularly if the independent living center goes in. We've got a lot of units down at Patriot Point, and we've got numerous units there at Cooperstown. It would seem like with those approved projects, the mix would be leaning more towards multifamily in the next years, a couple of years, than single family. So we might be pushing that percentage up.
Yeah, I was just looking at our moderate income housing plan and trying to pull that up, and my computer is not wanting me to, but I can tell you exactly the numbers of units that we have that are proposed to be built but haven't been built. So we have a number in our moderate income housing plan of entitled units. I think this number pushes up into the mid 20% wise if we were to have roughly the same number of single family permits come in and then build out the 400 units of apartments at Village at Prominence Point, the 100+ units at Cooperstown, and some of the other projects that are contemplated currently. The build out of Patriot Point, for instance, does push that number up into the like 20% range. Land area by strict area, it will never ever come close to the number of multifamily units by land area as we have single family, but you're right, that number will continue to fluctuate.
Anything else you have this evening you'd like to
Not
to the council before we open discussion?
If you want, let me just run through these four. Another comment that we had the first time that this was brought up was about neighborhood commercial. So I've found a few examples of what I would consider, context for neighborhood commercial. And these would be used to help us write the language that talks about that. So we reference specifically Cafe Mercantile at 1221 East 26th Street in Ogden. So this is a former single family home in an area that has probably 4,500 to 6,000 square foot lots, older homes, that has a little coffee shop and was historically a little mercantile, just a little store back when we weren't so transportation dependent on the car, that more people walked. So this likely would have had basic items, milk, bread, that sort of thing, and has long stood in Ogden as a successful coffee shop and blends right into the neighborhood. The next one, John. This is kind of interesting. This is a veterinary clinic that's at the corner of Weaver Lane and Angel Street in West Layton. It's been there forever. It used to be surrounded all by agricultural horse area and boarding areas. But if you look at the zoomed out aerial image now, it is just butted right up against quarter acre and smaller single family developments. And this area of these single family developments are like 700,000 to just over $1 million homes out on the west side in Davis County, and right next to an elementary school. It's next to a junior high. And at this point, it probably would be difficult to approve, but it's just built into the fabric of the neighborhood as this little veterinary clinic out on the west side. And you see little animals that have been born. I live close to this, so I've ridden bikes down with my daughters and shown them the little baby horses that were just born and are around in that little mini holding stable. But at times it's more busy, at times it's pretty light, but to me, as far as the agricultural history of North Ogden, this seems to fit into, neighborhood commercial can be defined in a bunch of different ways. The next slide, John. This is a little more intensive. This is in Salt Lake City. It's the 15th and 15th neighborhood. It runs between 2 blocks. I can't read the northern one, Emerson and Kensington. And this is old, early 1900s developed buildings that are all lined up. They're embedded into a whole single family neighborhood. And it has a restaurant and a bookstore and just a number of little, there's a gelato place, and every urban planner loves to talk about the little ice cream store on the corner that you walk to. But it's really low intensive commercial that's beneficial for the neighborhood because it's a little neighborhood hotspot. And it happens to be on 15th and 15th, which is the intersection of 15th East, 15th South, 2 relatively major transportation corridors that get you in and out of this area of Eastern Salt Lake City. And I think that it's a great benefit to that community. And then I think, do I have one more, John, or is that all of them? Oh, I got one more. And then the familiar Cold Springs Trout Farm. So this is my favorite example of, I would love to have accepted this land use application in 2022, that somebody come in and say that we're going to do a full-scale fish farm and community gathering place and all these things embedded into a neighborhood, because it works so well. This is beloved by the community, but it's hard to fathom this getting approved today. So thinking a little differently about neighborhood commercial and what the opportunities might be for North Ogden. These are just a few examples that I thought of that could maybe spur some conversation around whether those are positive ideas for the city or not, and what maybe the context around them could be. So that's everything that I have tonight on that.
Thank you, Scott, for your preparation and work in answering the questions. I think this question came about to help us make a decision on the future land use map. So council, I would ask if this is helpful. I do believe we've got some clarification on what the state is intending, and I don't, at this point, anything could change, but I don't see them really taking over major zoning definitions and requirements, at least this year. So let me just ask council, does this give you adequate information to help you further digest the proposed land use map? Do you need any additional information as we consider approving that proposal? If so, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Councilmember Swanson?
Scott, thank you for the work. This is particularly on page 27 of the packet. A lot of information, but certainly for me, helpful to visualize the kinds of definitions that we're looking at. You're distinguishing between the R15 low density, the R15 medium density, and how that applies. All of that is very informative for me and helps me make a good decision on this future land use map. So you are proposing that these would be the definitions that we would use. Is that correct?
Yeah, originally we were tasked, or we thought about how do we, I just blanked on the word. It's not entitled the general plan. It's
vest.
Yes, thank you. How we vest the general plan. And the thing that has lacked as we've brought forward requests to rezone is somewhere between the land use designation and the words that it says and how that ties specifically to an applicable zoning district. So this is staff's attempt to take that, and I'm not saying this is the right attempt, right? I'm just saying this is staff's interpretation. So if we were to fine tune anything, it would be what applicable zoning districts should or shouldn't be associated with any one land use designation. And I want to give credit to friends of mine, planners. I reached out to a few, one community, Layton City in particular, gentleman, Brandon Rippian, that I went to school with. His Layton City did this, and he as he and I talked, he said this was really helpful in helping the community understand what a zone means in the context of the general plan. And I think it was well worth the work to just write it out, basically, for me, because it helped me understand better. So those applicable zoning districts are the area that I think we should really focus in. What does downtown mixed use mean? If it does or doesn't mean R2, R3, R4, then it will give clarity to, say, the rezone request that's been tabled across the street from the skate park, right? And you can have a backing to rely on in making that decision in just having the context baked directly into the plan.
Thank you. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is really going to be helpful because coming back to making these exceptions, once we vest the zones, it makes kind of things fairly easy to make decisions. Right now, we're saying, well, that doesn't quite apply to the zone, but we're going to go ahead but with these definitions, I think it'll be very helpful. So thank you so much, Scott, and your staff for helping us that. Do you need any additional information, council, now to digest and look at the map? I can't see Councilmember Dalpaz, but everyone else is shaking their head. Are you okay with that, Councilmember Dalpaz?
Yes, everything looks great. Thanks for all your work, Scott.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to item number 7. Mr. Call is with us tonight, and he would like us to answer the question on whether to send an official letter to the state legislature on voting methods. So, John?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is a follow-up from the approval voting discussion and what the council would like to do. There's a few options. The state is still talking about mandating ranked choice voting, although it sounds like from conversations we've heard that they're shifting to it's an option for cities, but it's mandatory for state offices type of a situation, as opposed to what was, I think, proposed in the original legislation, which was it was mandatory for everyone. So really, this is just a chance for the council to talk about what your steps are, what you want to do. Would you like to send something official to the state legislature or to our representatives? And where do you want us to go from here?
Is there something that would apply here to the camel getting their nose in the tent?
Yes.
Yeah, to me, if the state kind of goes that way on state elections, it won't be long before they start mandating that down to the municipalities. But council, what's your desire on this? Do you want to send a letter? I think this was based upon the presentation that was made to us by the group that came in, and they were asking for support. Do you want to do that? You want to state our preference is stay where we're at, but we're okay with that? Let's go with you, Councilmember Barker. By the way, that's a nice shirt you have on this evening.
Thank you.
I
I just
have,
found it this evening.
yeah, I do have Councilmember Swanson's and Councilmember Severing's. I'll get those to them. So let's go with you, Councilmember Barker.
I'm of the opinion, I really don't know why this is all a big deal, but because everybody seems to have a new voting method, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Why do we got to complicate something that's not complicated? But I do like approval voting more than ranked choice voting, but I'm still of the opinion I'm going to follow what our county elections staff recommends that we do.
Councilmember Severing, you have any thoughts you'd like to share with us?
I support what Councilman Barker said. Do we have challenges with our voting system? The media wants us to believe that. I think we got to leave what we have alone if we are going to forward something, ranked choice voting. So that's my stand.
Councilmember Dalpaz?
In the Utah League of Cities Zoom that I watched yesterday, where they were going over all the legislative items, to John's point, yeah, it looks like they're going to recommend that things stay the same in cities. And I don't feel a need to send anything to the legislation unless we are being told that cities are going to be recommended to you. Yeah, I do not like ranked choice voting. It's more expensive. It's more confusing. It takes marketing outreach for the residents to even understand how to do it. I believe that the approval voting is a great thing, but I just don't think we're to a point that we need to officially send a letter. That's just what I think.
Thank you for your comments. Council Member Ekstrom, do you feel any different?
I'm not sure what happened to my video. I don't know what you're seeing, but hopefully you can hear me.
We can
the
hear
only
you, and
reason
we
that-
can just see you like you're frozen in time.
Okay.
We can see and
Which
hear
seems
you.
fine, other than I look a little constipated. But anyway, the only reason that I would send the letter is just because I'm getting all of these emails saying that kind of propaganda, I guess, for ranked choice, and I don't like ranked choice. And so I'm kind of getting the sense that the legislature is kind of being really marketed to about ranked choice voting, and they seem to be leaning that way. And so if they're going to dictate to us what we have to do, I want them to know that I particularly do not want ranked choice. I would much rather have approval voting or keep it the way it is.
So based upon the comments I'm hearing, and we'll go to Councilman Swanson to wrap this up. What I'm hearing thus far is there's no need, if we were to write a letter, it would be to our objection to ranked choice voting, not in favor of anything else. Is that a correct assumption? Councilmember Swanson, let's go to you and see if you can change the assumption if you'd like.
From my perspective, we're going to get ranked choice voting. The question is, will it be driven down to the municipal level? The nonpartisan, in our Zoom call yesterday on ULCT, what they said was that ranked choice voting in the substitute version of the bill would only be required in partisan races. So anything county level and above, where it's partisan, Democrat versus Republican versus constitutionalist, whatever, would require ranked choice voting. Only in nonpartisan races would we be allowed to use what we've traditionally used. I think we should send a letter supporting what we're currently using, asking for the addition of approval voting as a method that municipalities can use and experiment with if we so choose. And then asking that we not have ranked choice voting forced upon us. When I spoke with Ricky Hatch, ranked choice voting nearly doubles the cost of elections at each level. So at the city, county, state, it was actually more than doubles the cost of the election, and it's an absolute nightmare. But it's very well funded by some very powerhouse individuals from the state and nationally. It's very well funded, and their lobby group is very, very active, and that's why we're getting the pressure we are.
Okay, Councilman Swanson has made a recommendation. Do you want to accept that, Council? Shake your head. I don't know, JD, what you and
I like how Phil put it.
okay, and Council Member Ekstrom, we can't see you if you're jumping up for joy, or are you okay with that?
Yes, Phil articulated it better than I did, but yes, thank you.
Okay, so there's a lesson to be learned. You can change the assumptions by speaking up. So there you go. All right, we'll do that. John, would you get that taken care of, please? Hello, John?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on then, because I did read in our council procedures that the council has to vote to extend any meeting past 9:30 at night. If they don't vote to do that, the meeting's over. Now, you know, I don't know how that used to work in the old days. We've done fairly good along those lines, but I understand there used to be meetings till midnight. So let's go to public comments then. John, would you watch for hands to be raised for those who are participating with us electronically from the community?
We have a hand from Julie Anderson.
All right, Julie, if you just state your name and if you're a resident of North Ogden.
Yeah, Julie Anderson, and I am a resident of North Ogden. I've enjoyed the discussion tonight. I want you to know that. I think some really great things have been put forward. I do have one question, and you don't have to answer it now, but just as I was listening to Mr. Hanson, I really like the idea of the single family homes there by Jerry Shaw's property. I think that's a really great use of that piece of property, and stays, you know, I'm just going to say I really like it. But I have some questions about the traffic that will be coming onto Lowman View and Ben Lomond Drive. Those are two, right? Lowman View and Ben Lomond, especially Lowman View, as we have another subdivision that's going in down that road further. We're putting quite a bit of traffic onto that road, and it's really, I don't know if it's going to be able to take it. So if that can be addressed at some point as to how we're going to deal with the traffic that will be going onto that road, and even onto, I guess it's Pleasant View Drive, even the one that's going on to Pleasant View Drive, how that can be addressed also, because we're not going to close that road off. We made it so it's a right-hand turn only. So again, that's kind of one of the concerns I have that didn't seem to be talked about tonight. So just something to put into your heads. I'm not in any way being, you know, picky or anything, but I really like the idea of a completed park. I think we need to require that more of our developers as we go forward, especially the road situations. It can be an expensive cost to the city. So I just have that, but everything else, thanks to Scott Hess, he did a great job of breaking down those zones for us. And you guys, I really appreciate everything you had to say tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And I also read in the council procedures that the mayor can call on someone to answer the questions, a particular council member. So tonight I'm going to let you guys off the hook, but Julie, we did have a traffic study done when we put in the other subdivision over there. And the traffic that it would bear was much greater than that subdivision, or I believe this subdivision would put onto, is it Lowman View Drive? But we can review that. There was a traffic study done that talked about the amount of traffic that would bear. So we will review that and take a look at it for you, okay?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that.
Thank you. John, do we have anyone else?
We do. We have Richard Wainscard.
Okay, let's go to Richard.
Good evening, guys. I just have a quick little question. You know, me and Tate Sechrist both, we have no problems about wanting to make North Ogden beautiful. We have no problems of, you know, continually growing North Ogden City. The biggest concern we have is, you know, if we get an extension or deferral, that's neither here nor there. We just want to make sure that if we have to invest money on expanding this sidewalk, changing water lines, utility lines, boxes, things like that, and then down the road, you guys say, we want to now expand the sidewalk, our property taxes are going to go regardless. So I'm kind of paying for it twice in a way. Is that correct?
I'm not that familiar with the districts, but I would assume in all fairness that if the sidewalk's already in there, you wouldn't be included in the district. that there could be an exception, but we'd have to look into that.
That's one of our concerns, is having to pay for the thing twice if it's
That's a, yeah, good concern. And I think it would be highly unfair for a double payment. So we'll look into that to see if there was a special improvement district, if those that are already in compliance, because it would seem like to me that on those areas where we don't have sidewalk, it would be really unfair to ask people who already have sidewalk to pay, but we'll look into that. Good point.
And then another quick question on our parking strip that where the grass is at. When you drive down Washington Boulevard, there's a lot of the 10-foot sidewalks a lot closer to Washington Boulevard compared to other areas on Washington Boulevard. If you go by the car wash, it's not that parking strip, that boulevard of grass that they are eventually be putting in is maybe 4 feet wide. In ours, from the area, it's 6 feet wide of grass. And so it's hard to, when I put that 10-foot sidewalk down there, it's taking a big chunk of my property in comparison to other areas by the car wash, by the movie theater. It's different. It's all 10 foot, but it's closer to the sidewalk in some areas compared to other areas. And so I just didn't know how that's going to be when you're cutting a lot of property into my grass right now. Does that make sense?
You know, I can't visualize that, but we'll surely look at it as we try to make a decision on what to do here. So
Yeah, I'm all about making North Ogden beautiful. And if the sidewalk has to go in, I'm all for it. I just want there to be some sort of consistency going down there. If you do it in sections, if you do it chopping, I just feel like it's going to be a big eyesore. If it's 10 foot in one area, then 4 foot, then 10 foot and 4 foot. I think it'd be better just having it one section at a time.
Okay, thanks for your comments. Anything else you'd like us to consider?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John, anyone else?
Not at this time.
Okay, I would suggest that those who would want to make a comment probably had the chance to do that while Richard was speaking, to raise their hand. So we'll move then to item number 9 on our agenda, which is council, mayor, and staff comments. Council, do you have anything you've heard from citizens that you'd like to bring up? Any additional comments you may have that you'd like to discuss this evening in our work session?
Mayor?
Councilmember Ekstrom, we're glad you're back with us.
Yeah, I'm just turning on, I've just switched computer cameras, so I get a different angle. But anyway, at least I'm not frozen. You know, we opted this time, you know, at least for now, to not close Pleasant View Drive. But I think adding this park, and then I think people's concern also was the lack of the light on 300 East. And I think I would like to see if the council is still willing to kind of consider going that route, especially now that we have that, you know, that assumably we're going to have that park go in, that we could connect it. So that just kind of opens up my mind to, hey, can we revisit that? You know, just the closing it off and getting a light down on 300, and then, you know, it really opens that whole area up to connecting those parks. I mean, what does everybody think about that?
I think my recollection is, Councilmember Ekstrom, that was not a permanent decision, that we did say we would readdress it based upon the development along 2600 and the installation of a light there. So I think that's still open for discussion. I don't know if John or Lauren or Scott have an update on, you know, what the light's looking like there. But I do believe we left that open, and still we're seeing non-compliance with the way we've got it set up now. We said we would give it a shot to see if people complied, and so far I don't think we've had any major accidents, which is great. But council, am I wrong in the fact that we we left that open for future discussion based upon changes in the future. Is that your recollection by shaking of the head? Yeah.
Mayor JD has a comment.
Okay, JD, go ahead.
So, hey, I'm just thinking this through. We've had a lot of resident comments about the issue at Washington and 2700 where people turn right, and there's kind of a log jam there. And we've been to UDOT and we've asked them to look at it, and we're kind of at a standstill there. I feel like some people are using that intersection to turn right south off of Washington by the veterinary clinic. So for now, that's kind of a new consideration that we never had to think about until we knew that there was a problem at 2700. Because I think some people are starting to turn right onto Pleasant View Drive when they're turning south to get around having to get stuck at the light at Washington and 2700. So I just think that's something to be aware of. That's kind of a new thing that we wouldn't have known about a year ago.
That's a good point. Yeah, like I say, things are changing. So as we readdress that, I think the council indicated they thought the time to readdress that would be once we had a light there at 300 East. So until that, I believe we're kind of status quo with where we're at today. But that's, yeah, a lot of things are changing there. So good point. Anything else, council, you've heard from that we need to put on our burner to consider?
Mayor,
Councilmember Swanson.
I just wanted to echo the comment that Councilmember Severing made in the chat. Scott, excellent work on the research that you did, the presentation that you gave, the information that you were able to provide us. Excellent work. Very much appreciated.
I think that's a very good comment. I think we've been all very pleased with the progress that's been made under Scott's leadership. And I'm really excited for him to expand his horizon with this continuous improvement assignment that he has. So from addition to the council comments, Scott, let me add mine that I hopefully have already expressed. We have a lot of confidence in what you're doing, and we're grateful you're with us as a team member.
Thank you all.
Was that you, Scott?
Yeah, I just said thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. I would just say one thing. I sent out an email to all of the council asking you to review the council procedures. There's some fairly funky things in there. I think things have worked fairly well, but if there's some improvements we need to make from our training last week, we can surely implement those. But please take a look at those so we can have a discussion. There's definitely some things that need to be changed in there. For instance, John, you may want to chime in on this, but as I read it, we cannot have a Zoom closed meeting, and we know there's some items that we need to be addressing. But as I read the current procedures, it prohibits closed meeting versus electronic. It says council members must be present.
So your declaration would override that for the month of February?
Okay. That's a good point. Thank you for clarification. But there are some other things in there that are fairly funky, so take a look at it. And then I would just mention the program we implemented at this point in time has resulted in the addition of 2 officers to our police force with the referral and bonus for retention and recruitment. We're still short. We've still got some ways to go, but I think we've given the chief some tools that he can use in that regard. And then just an update, we have been having bi-weekly meetings or bi-monthly meetings, I guess, or whatever, every other week with Big D Construction. There's been a few minor changes to the floor plan, but I think we're making progress there. Obviously, some hurdles to overcome with some things that are tuning up, but I think we are progressing. Do you have anything to add to that, John?
I agree with you, Mayor, that we are working at it, being hyper diligent with budget and site plan issues, and we are moving forward.
Then just one other comment I have is really I'm relying on council members in their assignment with each department to become very involved. John and myself and Jamie will continue to be working on the amount of money that'll be allocated to each department to spend. But I'm really going to rely on you heavily to make sure that those are meeting the things we required. That wasn't me, that was the city dog, that was Cooper. That wasn't me.
Bless you, Mayor.
But I do think it's important that you take that assignment seriously and make sure that the money that's then allocated to each line item by the department meets the criteria of having an outcome that's tied into our particular objectives. And John, I do think we did have an update, probably not needed tonight, but as we go forward on the survey we did with the citizens regarding our priorities and some of the feedback we've got there, I think in our next meeting it would be good to maybe update the council on that.
Okay, I will put it on the agenda.
Okay. Staff, any comments you have, John? Or I think Joyce is serving as our recorder tonight. So thank you, Joyce, of staying with us and helping us out. We really appreciate that. Anything, John, you have?
No, I don't have anything tonight.
All right. We'll be now looking for adjournment if nobody has anything else. Do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Okay. Second to adjournment.
Second.
All right. Thank you for your attention tonight. And I think we had a good meeting and gives us some food for thought. So appreciate your service. Have a good evening.